Okay, check 1 2. 1 2. Sudden, unexpected, live. No warning. Just went live with it. So I'm gonna wait, but not too long, for people to arrive before I kind of get started, because obviously this is YouTube, so anyone who joins in can quickly flash rewind it. But I'm guessing people are going to want to interact with me live, so I've got to wait for a little while. I tried to schedule this. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but I have figured out how to do most other things now. I did say I had to come back to this because, hello, Miss Nosway, good afternoon. How you doing? Yeah, I did say I had to come back and revisit this. I thought it was going to be really straightforward. I did my first live, I think a couple of days ago. And I just thought it was a case of turning your webcam and then it would give you some options to show screen and share screen like it does on Zoom. But yeah, it didn't work that way. But I figured it out now. I've got it all kind of like plugged in. Everything should be working together quite well. So I think visually you can see me. I hope you can hear me okay. Just give me a little confirmation. I don't know how many people I've got in at the moment. Let me double check. Yeah, we're a small room at the moment. There's about 7 of us. Just give me a little confirmation, a nod via the chat, just to let me know that you can hear me okay. And yeah, I think after I've had a bit of a confirmation from you guys, I'm just going to get started and just dive straight in. Sounds good. Thank you, Miss Nosway. Superb. Okay. I think we can get cracking now then. So yeah, as you've seen in the thank you, Leo. Excellent. So the visuals are good. I'm hoping you can see my screen. My very messy 5 out of 5. Thank you there. Thank you very much. So the sound, I know the sound's good. You can see my very messy desktop, which I hope doesn't reveal too much about me. But I think I'm going to dive straight in at this stage. So second time's a charm. Yeah. Well, actually, it's third time's a charm, TNR, because yesterday I randomly went live, I think, for about 1 minute, accidentally, just trying to do this thing. So I still haven't figured out how to schedule it, but we'll get there in the end. But anyway, enough of the small talk. I'm going to dive straight in now. So obviously, those of you who are on here, you've probably seen the thumbnail. And this live stream is going to be about my visit to the British Museum. I was going to just kind of do this how I do my normal videos, where I'd, essentially just kind of go through what I've got, record it, edit it, chop it up. But I thought actually doing it this way would be much more interesting, because it gives me an opportunity to interact with you guys. And it also gives me an opportunity to not have to edit, not have to spend hours editing it and making it something perfect. We could just like go through this together. And I think that's just a much easier way to do it. Akinola, thank you very much for your kind message. So I'm going to do that. I've got quite a lot to cover. Just to give a bit of background, I haven't been to the British Museum that many times. I think this is my 3rd visit, all in all. Every time I go there, I'm fascinated, but it hasn't changed that much over the past, I'd say, 15 years. It's been very, very similar. So there's not really a massive reason to go, other than if I'm, taking my kids or something like that. There's not really much motivation for me to go there. It's not like it's always chopping and changing and they're bringing new things in. And it's like, yeah, how many times do you want to kind of go there and see things that belong in other countries? There's a limit to it. But I think if you're living near any of the kind of key global museums, be it the Met, the Louvre, or whatever it is, if you've got any access to those kind of resources, and then obviously I would encourage you to visit them, because they are fascinating and very, very eye-opening. And I'm going to take you through my visit. I think there's things in the British Museum, and I think there's a degree to which you have to almost open your eyes to be able to see what's being shown to you. So I'm hoping that this will be eye-opening for those of you who are on the live stream. I think some of you might find some of the stuff a little bit far-fetched, and that's fine. Okay, don't be threatened, because this is very much not going to be a case of me trying to convince people one way or the other. As far as I'm concerned, we're all on a learning journey, and some of the things that I'll share, I might not be fully convinced about, but at the same time, I think it's important that we just kind of, we're transparent with one another. We're quite open, and often that's often been the key to me discovering new things about, world history, our history personally as, melanated people, African history. It just literally is a case of me kind of going, oh, that kind of sounds a bit weird, or that looks a bit different, or that doesn't. A very common one for me actually is what they're saying doesn't match what I'm seeing, or what they're saying doesn't match what I'm observing. That's a really common one for me, and you realize how much transliteration plays in people's kind of interpretation of information that they're given. So even things as small as that, I'm going to dive into the museum thing really quickly, but I just want to really just quickly talk about the fact that even things like the Bible. I do come from a Christian household, and I think one of the things that I discovered at quite a young age is that our interpretation of the Bible is totally linked to what we're told about the Bible. If you read the Bible without someone kind of in your ear telling you what X, Y, and Z means, it's a very interesting book, and it's completely different to what modern religion. The Bible and Christianity are two completely different things, and that's a whole nother discussion, and I think is one that I'd love to have as well, because the Bible's got some very interesting things in it. But yeah, that's a different one. So let's dive in. Thank you, Leo. I think it's facts. That's what I think. So let me quickly pull up. So I'm going to start off, and I'm just going to kind of like dive in from the start. I'm going to work kind of chronologically from what I saw. So I took this picture, and obviously, this is the outside of the museum. But one of the reasons I took this picture is actually as a structure. If you go to the British Museum, it's one of the most amazing structures you'll see. And I kind of, to some degree, do question, whether or not we're capable of building such things in this day and age. You don't see this kind of architecture. And there are obviously, there's a few channels out there that do kind of explore the fact that, you have old world structures and things that potentially weren't built by the people who say they built them. So I think, if you're of that mindset, the British Museum certainly does qualify for one of these old world structures. It has gigantic doorways. Obviously, we've put smaller doors in since then. I wish I had a better picture in this, but I'm just going to zoom in slightly. But this is the original doorway, as you can see here. So you can see how small these people are. So this doorway is about, about 30 to 40 foot. And it does beg the question why you need a 40-foot doorway. And it's not, and this is unusual, by the way. If you live in London, you'll know that this kind of architecture is very common. These kind of, very heavily, stone, stone architecture and, solid stone architecture, massive doorways. We have these buildings strewn all across London. And it does kind of beg the question, why why was architecture made in such a way? I mean, it's beautiful to behold, but functionality wise, it's kind of bizarre, and we don't build like this anymore. Nothing like this, and something kind of tells me that we'd struggle to build like this. But anyway, that's a whole another discussion. I'm going to move on, and let's have a look at some content. So these are just some images that I picked. I took this one interested me. This is not Egyptian, this is Roman. But it did interest me because of that kind of crown, which we see in ancient Egypt. So this did interest me because I thought to myself, well, straight away, let's say this crown is an inheritance from ancient Egypt, something that the Romans have carried along, with them. So I found it. Yeah, I looked at this and I just thought, oh, well, that's a bit of, something that's been borrowed from the Egyptian culture. And if just to be clear as well, I'm going to be very transparent from the jump. I don't think the Roman culture is what we've been sold. The Roman culture is one of the most vandalized cultures out there. And when I say vandalized, I mean the Vandals. I'm being very specific there. I'm not actually just using a random term there. I'm talking about the Vandals. They were a culture known for defacing artwork and statues in their own image, and the Vandals were responsible for the fall of the Roman Empire. The Vandals and the Goths, and it was in their culture to basically deface. So the term defacing and vandalism come from the same culture. This one culture of Vandals, who were basically I'm not sure exactly where from, but I believe it was Northern Germanic origins, but I could be wrong there. It could also be Asia, so I'm not quite sure. But either which way, their thing was to deface statues and to deface materials to basically match their own culture. So if they invaded a higher culture, they would not destroy everything. They would keep things, but make it match their face, so to speak. So one of the biggest kind of like unknown secrets about the Roman civilization is actually we know very little about what they look like, because so much of their works were vandalized. That's where we get the word vandalism from. So so with the Romans, I don't think it's black and white. I actually think there's a preponderance of evidence to suggest that they were actually more melanated as a culture than the Greeks before them. I think there's lots of evidence. So yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, isn't it funny how a lot of the white podcasters and YouTubers are leading to the charge talking about Cleopatra not being black, which is not a problem, but Stati G boldly that blacks need their own. You lost me a little bit in the middle there, but yes, I got the gist of what you're saying there. I mean, yeah, that push is, I spoke about that ad nauseum. That kind of push against Cleopatra is very deliberate, and people are in their feelings about it, and it's totally ridiculous, and it's totally kind of like disproportionate. I actually watched the Piers Morgan did an interview with that guy, that Egyptian lawyer, Hassim something or another, and they had someone else kind of like representing, I don't know who the person was, to be totally honest with you, but they had someone kind of representing and defending the choice of Cleopatra, and I actually think he done a really good job. So I don't know if you've seen that on YouTube. I think it's like a 10-minute show or something like that, but it kind of has the face-to-face or face-off between this guy and this Egyptian lawyer, and I actually think the guy did a really good job. I agreed with pretty much every point that he made, so it was really interesting to watch. Obviously the YouTube comments and the weight of support is going with the Egyptians at this time, because people would prefer anything than for black people to basically start reclaiming their lost history. That's kind of the worst case scenario, isn't it? Salute to the chat, salute to you. Keep the ancestors' fire burning. We see them. Thank you very much. We will indeed. Okay, so this one is the kind of like the first major interesting piece that I came across. This is actually, this is going to annoy a lot of you. This is the death mask of Napoleon. And I took this image because obviously Napoleon's a figure in history that I really do dislike a lot. I think he's been responsible for quite a lot of not just the conquests, what we know him for, but I think it was Napoleon who had the quote that history is nothing but a fable agreed upon. And I think that Europeans rode with Napoleon, with that kind of mindset that was there. That became their mantra, that they were going to tell a version of history. And I think that came hand in hand, if I'm going to be totally honest with you, with the kind of gnosis of the birth of racism around the period of Napoleon, being that kind of 17th, 18th century period. I think a lot of it rode on, those words that he kind of left. Yeah, he kind of left his, he kind of left the French with, because they were very much kind of like, well, truth is out the window now. We're just going to tell the version of history that makes us look good and we don't care how honest it is. So yeah, this is Napoleon's death mask. This is apparently what he looked like. So there you go, good old no lip Napoleon there. Let's keep him moving. Now this one, this is kind of a bit random, but I took a picture of this because hairstyle of a royal Mangbetu woman. Now this isn't ancient by any means, if I remember correctly. I think this is quite recent. This might be 20th century. But the reason I took a picture of this one is because it highlighted to me something that I've always believed about the Egyptian crowns. We look at the Egyptian crowns often. Obviously, we're very familiar with the crown of Nefertiti and all the other Egyptian crowns. And my view is that the Egyptian crowns were normally just, either leather or cloth wrapped around the hair. So whatever the shape of the crown was, that was the shape of the hair. It was quite interesting. Someone told me they saw an artifact of King Tut, and it just looked like he had a high top fade. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not sure if it was a bas relief or if it was a statue. I need to kind of have a little research. But what I found instantly interesting is the fact that if you look at all of King Tut's, many of King Tut's statues, like the mannequin, his crown is the shape of a high top. So I wouldn't be surprised if his hair underneath was the shape of a high top. So I captured this image because many of the styles that we see for the crowns are not achievable unless you essentially have rigid hair or hair that grows up or afro hair. The crowns required a degree of rigidity to the hair in order for them to be achievable. So obviously this isn't supposed to kind of be a one-for-one of what the Egyptian crowns were, but it just gives you an idea of how you need kind of, relatively rigid hair to achieve a lot of the styles of the crowns in ancient Egypt. So I just took that picture. Good evening, Gregory. How you doing, sir? I only took this picture. There's nothing really drastic about this picture. I only took this picture because I really like the pillar. And I just think it's a cool style. It would be nice to kind of resurrect some of these things. But anyway, let me skip forward. Now, this image is one of the first images that's going to be a little bit controversial that caught my eye, but I had to do it. Now, actually, I'm going to ask people who are live, there's quite a few of us, 75 of us live. Please do hit the likes up, by the way. If there's quite a few of us currently viewing, we could get the likes up to like near 100. That would be amazing. So please do hit up the likes if you're currently in the live. It will allow us to kind of like reach more people and get more people into live. Does anyone know who this is a picture of? That's what I'm going to first ask the question. If you know who this is, just kind of drop it in the live chat, and I'll tell you in a second. I'm trying to. I wonder, is there a delay? Actually, no. I'm looking at the. Yeah. So I probably won't get a response immediately because it looks like there's a slight delay between what's broadcasting and what I'm showing. So actually, I'm going to. There you go. So it's caught up. So Eternal High Frequency has said, is that Charlotte? Very close. You're very close. It's not Charlotte, but you're very close. And I'm glad that you said that, because for those of you who know, Queen Charlotte is the one acknowledged royal where they are open. They say, yes, she has African ancestry. They're like, okay, look, Queen Charlotte, fine. She has African ancestry. It's kind of like, yeah, well, you rumbled us. Now, they don't openly admit that Queen Charlotte had African ancestry. It's not like it's common knowledge. On the one hand, they say it's common knowledge, but on the other hand, they're like, well, we don't know where the African ancestry comes from. And it's still somewhat kind of hidden. So this image is not of Queen Charlotte, by the way. I'm going to be really clear. This isn't Queen Charlotte. This image is actually of her husband, George III. And I saw, this is George III, known as the Mad King. And see, you've said Chevalier. So look, it's really interesting. I've asked who this is, and instantly I've had 2 responses of people saying this is someone of melanated ancestry. So, the great thing is you're seeing what I'm seeing. I know that I'm not going crazy here. I saw this picture. I was like, well, that's clearly someone of melanated ancestry. It's not just the fact that the skin is darker than the hair. It's also the fact that you can see kind of full lips. You can kind of see it's just someone who has some kind of melanation. Now, am I saying this person is dark skinned like me? No, I'm not. But there's clearly some kind of ancestry here. And this is George III. Now, I'm getting Saint Maurice. I'm getting Chevalier. I'm getting Queen Charlotte in the chat, so you're all seeing what I'm seeing. But George III is not someone that's sold at all as someone who has any kind of melanated ancestry. Yet when we look at this image and other images of him, so this is once again what I was talking about at the start of the live stream, was the fact that often it's just a little spark you get. You kind of see something and you go, well, that doesn't, that looks like something that we're not being told. And lo and behold, this is George III. So I started doing a bit of, research, looking at other images of George III. So actually, before I get there, let me just quickly show everybody Queen Charlotte, who isn't familiar. So this is an image of Queen Charlotte, probably one of the most famous images of Queen Charlotte. This one is actually hangs in the Queen Charlotte's Hospital in London, and that's where I first saw her. So I first saw this image before anyone told me anything, before I knew anything, and I saw this image hanging in Queen Charlotte's Hospital in Hammersmith, and I was like, well, that person's definitely got some kind of melanated ancestry. In fact, I actually just thought this is a whitewashed image. That was instantly what came to my mind. I was like, well, this is clearly someone who was definitely dark-skinned, or darker-skinned, I should say, maybe kind of like a medium brown complexion, and they've just basically tried to lighten it, and they haven't done a good job, because if you kind of zoom in, I mean, this hair is just, an impossibility for someone who doesn't carry some kind of melanated ancestry. So the long and short of it is they've been quite open. They've come out and they've said, Queen Charlotte, I'll give you another image of her. This is an even better image. This is another image of Queen Charlotte. You can see quite clearly here. She actually looks like, ironically, here she actually looks like the actress that's playing Cleopatra in this image. And look at the hair. That's it's definitely someone who's of melanated ancestry. So this is Queen Charlotte. You can see she's definitely darker than her attendant here. She has very afro hair, and she's not just that, it's the features. Look at very full features. Now what I mean about the way they hide these things are, if you go to the royals website, so the official royal website on, so that's royals.org.uk in the UK, this is the image that they'll show you of Queen Charlotte. So, you have to ask yourself the question, how do we get from what I've just shown you, which was this, how do we get from this to this? And then they'll try and tell you that they're not trying to hide anything. So even though they're kind of semi-acknowledging the fact that Queen Charlotte was of, melanated or mixed ancestry, and we don't really know how much, they're still taking every effort to completely whitewash this woman. So this isn't some kind of obscure image. This is on the official royal website. So for the Americans tuning in, there is a reason why they're treating Meghan Markle that way, and it's not because she's a difficult woman. Okay. This is the reality. So those are images of Queen Charlotte, and this is the woman who's acknowledged. Now, the image that I just showed you at the start that we kind of like kicked off with was this image of George III here, the Mad King, and I was like, no, you ain't gonna tell me that person doesn't have some kind of melanated ancestry. So I did a bit more searching, and I found this image as well. Now, this to me is, look at the hair. It's, you have to kind of look for kind of what's sensible here, and this happens quite a lot with their imagery. I've got mixed race friends who don't look very different from that, and here's another image of George III. Okay, now even from this side view, this was a bigger confirmation, because you can see that subnasal prognathism is relatively quite strong. Okay, so it's quite a strong subnasal prognathism there, and just the general look of him, I mean, that is, once again, I'm not saying that he's black. I'm saying there's a massive possibility these are whitewashed. I'm definitely saying that's a possibility, and whether or not you accept that, that's absolutely fine. Like I said, I'm not here to convince anyone, but in my opinion, these are whitewashed images, i.e. they would have been darker originally, but even with the attempted lightening, to me, I'm seeing mixed ancestry in potentially both Queen Charlotte and King George III, potentially. I'm seeing it in both of them. So, you know, here's another image. Just looking at the facial features on this image, you know, you just, to me personally, you just don't get these facial features in people who don't carry some kind of melanation, some kind of, you know, mixed ancestry, some kind of African ancestry. It has to be there, it has to be present. These are just not, just not normal features. So then, it starts to beg the question, if both of them were of some kind of mixed ancestry, where do we go from there? You know, it's really, really interesting. So anyway, let me hit some of these comments, because I've been talking for a little while and I'm going to dive back in. So a few people guess Saint Maurice, etc., etc. Funny how her skin's been lightened. Absolutely, I agree. Got a wow there. I agree. That wow was probably how they changed Queen Charlotte's face. Went from beauty to the beast. I agree. Alexander Pushkin, the father of Russian literature, is the great grandson of Abraham Petrovich Ganibal, the African Russian general. Yes, so Pushkin is definitely of African ancestry. Freedom Ring says, entering your video cast about 9 minutes late. Yes, the Vandals were a Germanic barbarian group who actually vandalized all the way into North Africa, which might explain some of the North African demographic trauma. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much, Freedom Rings, for that input. That's really useful. So I think we're kind of seeing the same thing in terms of the Vandals and their impact on history. So qualiterate fact. Sorry, you have to school me up there, Mr. Gregory Hill. I'm not sure what exactly that means. I probably missed something really obvious. And then Keith says, greetings from Mali. Would love to see a reconstruction of kings like Taharqa, Shabaka. Yeah, we'll get those done. So 25th dynasty is in my scope. Don't worry about that. I will definitely get onto that. I'm actually really looking forward to doing 25th dynasty. All right, so please do Freedom Rings watch back from the beginning. All right, so I'm going to now move on, because we dwelled on King George III for a little bit too much there. I'm not got much more to add to that at this stage. So I'm just going to keep moving forward. Where were we? So yeah, King George III, Prince of Wales. And this is, the funny thing about this is, just looking at dates, obviously ruled from 1751 to 1760. That's relatively recent, isn't it? And this is one of the things that I said was a little bit, it's a bit disturbing when you start looking back in history and you start seeing, melanated people where you're not expecting to see them. It kind of does challenge your sensibilities to a degree, because you're kind of like, oh dear, things aren't that straightforward. So this is just an artifact that I saw. It's just a vase. It's not labeled, I think, as such as anything. I don't think it's even labeled as an African. And it's my personal point of view that people like this would have been quite common in England during the 16th, 15th and 14th century. I think they were common. That's basically what my research has led you. I think I mentioned William Hogarth in my last live stream. He's an artist you can look into who does depict, amongst just the British society as it was. And I'm not saying you'd walk down the street in Britain and it looked like Lagos. That's certainly not what I'm stating. But what I am saying is that, it probably wouldn't look too different to walking down London or New York today. That kind of mix it goes back a lot longer than people think, and we didn't suddenly start mixing after transatlantic, But anyway, let me move on. A couple of not too relevant photos here, just ones that I thought were pretty, and I'll stop at the next. Okay, so here's another one. So, absolute fact. Thank you, Slick Insider. Africans did spread around the world first. Now, this picture here, this was another one that kind of stopped me, and I was like, oh, this has got my attention. Once again, just on that kind of like, so this is, let me get the name from the next slide. This is Leonello d'Este. Okay, so this dates back to the 15th century, so 1407 to 1450. And once again, I saw this image and I was like, you know, it's, hair doesn't stand up like that once again quite easily for people who are just purely of European ancestry. So once again, I looked at this image and I looked at it thinking, okay, there's probably a degree of mixedness there, or maybe maybe a North African kind of phenotype. I wasn't really looking for too much, but I thought I took this image as a reference, and then I used the reference once again to do a little bit more research. And when I came back and did more research, I'll show you some of the images that I found. I found this. So this is the same person. Oh, let me zoom in here. So this is the same person here. So you can see that hair is pretty afro on this coin. Okay. And I found another image here, and the next one was probably a little bit more striking, where I was like, okay, there's something going on here, something we're not being told about this person. So I zoomed in here, and this one looks very African. If you pulled this coin, out of Congo or something, and you said, yeah, this is, I wouldn't be surprised. This is now on this coin, this is particularly Afro hair, and not just the actual hair, it's actually the features as well. And actually, if you look at this kind of like front view of, I'm not sure what this kind of represents, but there's definitely something going on around here. Okay, this Leonello de Este. So if you Google him, you will find images. But to me, I think the images once again are guilty of whitewashing. So I'm just going to kind of show you what kind of images you get if you Google Leonello de Este. And the images to me are a bit of a joke, because I just don't think it's what we're seeing. And it's normally, by the way, when you do Google these images, it's normally Wikipedia that is the authority that's taken. So I'm just going to try and pull up an image full screen. If it allows me to. Sorry, just bear with me. Should have really downloaded this before. There we go. Okay, so. No. I'm going to have to just drag this window in. Bear with me. Oh dear. So this is not smooth, is it? There we go. Okay, I'll just drag this in because I can't do any better than that at the moment. Will it allow me? Okay, so here it is. So this is the image that you get now, and to me, I just, I could be, like people might think right now on the stream that I'm clutching at straws, but to me, this is just an attempt to kind of make this make sense. Why would you have a weird bowl cut like that, and then straight hair? Why would it be depicted on all the coins as being this kind of Afro texture? Yeah, this looks to me like an explanation, I don't know. I'm not convinced by this image, but that's just me personally. I'm being totally, transparent. That I see whitewashing there personally. So yeah, there you go. I'll leave that at that. Let's have a look. Anyway, so I'm gonna move on from that one. Sorry. Keep losing track. Here we are. So this is where we were. So I'll move on. Now the next one that really caught my attention was this one. Now this is Frederick III of Saxony. And as soon as I saw this image, I was like to my son, I was like, that's I know an African when I see an African. And that to me was the representation of someone who's got pretty extensive kind of African ancestry or melanated ancestry. You can see there's quite a lot of prognathism there. So, by the way, I say prognathism a lot, and let's assume that everyone knows what it means. It basically just means the lower half of the face kind of protrudes forward more than the upper half of the face. So what you'll find with Europeans, the common phenotype is that where the back of the eye is, that will fall in line with where the back of the mouth is. So it will almost be like a straight line drawn from the back of the eye to the back of the mouth. When it protrudes forward quite a bit, it's called prognathism. Now, one of the things they describe, and I think I mentioned this in the last live stream, is they now describe it as Habsburg jaw, particularly if it's in Europeans, because in Europeans it's a bizarre thing. It's not something that you're supposed to see, not at least not a lot of. So it's kind of classified as this disability. Now, just to be clear about Habsburg jaw, the reason they call it Habsburg jaw is because there's a royal line. So this is where you have to kind of go, okay, there's something going on here. There's a royal line or royal lineage called the Habsburg lineage, and that covers, and actually Frederick III of Saxony is of that lineage. And they basically explain that the reason you go back in time and you see loads and loads of royalty with Habsburg jaw, with prognathism, is because they all have this kind of, it will spread through that kind of royal lineage, this kind of facial deficiency. So it's just their way of basically explaining away the fact that you're going to go back in time and you're going to see loads of African looking rulers, you know, from Frederick III of Saxony to the one I've just showed you, you know, and they'll explain away the reason they look this way. And it's not to do with some kind of deficiency. This is just this is a normal face. If you go to, you know, if you're familiar with melanated people or people with kind of some kind of melanated blood, but it's not in Europe. So this is the thing. This is why they try to explain it away using these kind of medical terminology to hide the fact that these are African people. So this is Frederick III of Saxony. Now, like I said, once again, if you Google him, this is what you'll find. So let me just pull up some images. Bear with me. Here we go. So if you Google Frederick III of Saxony, you'll find, I've got another one of him as well, actually. So I was going to quickly like flip between the two. So this is another one of the same person, Frederick III of Saxony again. And once again, I saw that and I was like, oh, that looks like a dude with quite a lot of African ancestry. So you've got these two images of the same person. So once again, if you Google him, you'll find... In fact, I've got a window open just here, haven't I? So bear with me. Frederick III Saxony. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to show you really quickly one of the images that you'll get off him. So I'm just going to pull in my Google image search really quickly. Sorry. I hope I haven't lost my live stream. It's really struggling. My machine's gone a bit slow doing all that dragging. So sorry, I hope you can see that image okay. Let me just pull it over here. So this is what you'll find. This is kind of like the main image you'll find of Frederick III of Saxony. And I kind of see what they're kind of doing there. And, you know, you could take that and say, okay, well, fair enough. Maybe those coins were just kind of like, you know, those coins were just kind of like, you know, coincidences that they happen to look a little bit African and this is what they're trying to represent. But then you keep searching and you do uncover some more stuff that looks a bit dodgy, which once again leads you to the conclusion that actually, no, I still think this might be an issue of whitewashing. So if I quickly show you this image, have a look at this one. Now that, to me, is, I mean, I can't unsee that. I cannot unsee that. That, to me, is really African looking. I mean, I'm not sure what this kind of like netting he has over his hair is, but he clearly has, first of all, very stiff hair. So he's got this kind of like, I don't know if it's a fishnet or whatever that he's wearing over his head, but his hair clearly grows upwards. And people of African descent know that our hair grows upwards. Yeah. You look at the beard, and the beard, they've even given it the Kemetic circle. So, like on the crowns of Kemet, because they represented hair, they put these circles to show that it was kind of afro hair. Look at that beard. You're not going to explain that away with Habsburg jaw. Okay, this is definitely someone of melanated ancestry. I'm not going to be told otherwise. And I actually found a really good website when I was doing all this research, because I just literally then started finding other people who had come to the same. Now, bear in mind, this is just me walking through the British Museum, seeing a coin and going, "Oh, that's a black guy," and taking a picture of it. Lo and behold, people have done research already on the fact. So that I found this website. I'm trying to find the name of it. If I find the name of the website, I'll definitely share it. It's a really good one. But they basically expose the fact that this is a whitewash fake. And if you see by the way, we're going to do a little bit of work on the use of infrared and X-ray by the National Portrait Gallery. That kind of is basically revealing a lot of these portraits where they've whitewashed them. This is an X-ray. Now, I know straight away people will say, well, X-ray reverses the colors, and that's not true. Okay, when you see they've already reversed the X-ray colors by the time they show it to you. So when you see an image like this, look at the color of his scarf, okay, or the shirt, sorry. It's white, like it's supposed to be. Look at the color of his kind of dark, bare skin kind of thing that he's wearing, that's dark. But then look at the color of his skin, that should be closer to the color of the scarf if it was originally supposed to be like this. But this is the painted over image, and the painted over image is dark, and it doesn't do this consistently. You'll see that if the person underneath is pale skinned, then this would look pale skinned. The person underneath here is very, very dark, very dark. So this is a whitewashed version of the portrait of Frederick III of Saxony. And I can't remember, someone mentioned about Saxony, about the meaning of Saxons, the sons of the, I can't remember. Someone gave me the meaning. I wish I could remember. But anyway, that's so there you go. That one caught my attention, and lo and behold, a little bit of research took me and made me discover some more things that I didn't know. So there you go. And if I find the link to that website, I will share it with everyone as well, because it's a really good site. Let me go to the comments, because I haven't hit the comments for a little while now. So let's have a look. Olives come in two colors, black and green. Yes, never be fooled with that olive skin BS. I ain't never seen a little green man. Absolutely. When they talk about olive skin, then they give you people who basically have, really, really, pale beige skin. That's not the same thing. An olive is brown. I was going to say, you said black and green. Brown is actually the most common color of an olive. A very dark, a very solid brown is very, very common color for olives. So when people talked about people being olive skinned, they were actually talking about people having that kind of deeper than the caramel brown, probably slightly, just a tad lighter than my skin. Talia. Oh, welcome, Talia. Always nice to have you here. Saw a documentary on TV a few years ago that spoke of Africans and African European mixed people in Britain in the 15th, 16th century. They're finally getting some recognition in modern Europe. Yep, but they're going to have to go back further than that. But I think what's happening now is they're being forced to acknowledge some of these truths that are coming out. So if I look at Frederick III of Saxony, we're talking about 15th century here, 15th, 16th century. So yeah, they're going to have to start acknowledging it. King George II allegedly used to be called Black Boy. Boom, there you go, OGP1. It's said that that's where the Black Boy pubs get that name. So there you go. Weren't the Habsburgs inbreeding though? Yeah, I think most royalty did inbreed, Shell. So once again, this is a part of the challenging thing. I'm not saying, melanated equals good and pure. Some of these people have deplorable histories and deplorable track records in terms of their impact on the world. So yeah, this is just something that we're gonna have to reconcile with. Much love, AJ. Teen Glam Box, check out the book with Black Cleopatra. You have to tell me what the name of that book is, or unless it is called Black Cleopatra. Tan skin was never even spoke about until modern Hollywood times. Swarthy, thank you. Let's go through some of these terms. Swarthy, Swartz, Scott, Dusky, Sepia, Mulatto, Mixed, Dark, Black, Moor, Blackamoor, Half-breed, just means black. Yep. I think they were definitely more nuanced with complexion. So nowadays it would just mean black. But I think back then, when race didn't exist and you had to describe people, they could see nuance. It's kind of like people just see black people. And I can't remember who I was speaking to yesterday, but we were talking about, I was replying to a comment. So this is quite important, actually. I was replying to a comment, and someone said to me, because they were talking about the fact that I'd mentioned the fact that, African Americans probably come from a mixture of different places, not just Africa. And that's something I don't want to kind of like push, my thoughts on anyone, because I know it's quite a sensitive subject, and I understand why people, I understand why it's important that we unite, perhaps around Africa. I do understand that. So I just kind of share this history, and kind of where you fall on it is totally fine with me. There's no right or wrong way to approach this. But the one thing he did say is, he said that, one of these people said, if we're not African, then why do we look like Africans? And my response is, well, you don't to me. And that wasn't me being rude. Yes, we both look black, but to me, I've learned to see the nuance and the uniqueness of what we classify the African American is. And actually, one of the things that I actually enjoy doing, which my wife really hates, is we'll watch shows and that I haven't seen before, and I'll go straight away, he's not African American, he's not, and I'll be able to pick out all the cast members that aren't African American. And I've done this a lot. I did this, when I first saw Get Out with David Kaluuya, I was like, he's definitely African. I did this when I watched Bel Air, with the kid that plays Carlton. I was like, yeah, he's definitely African. I can pick people out. I can pick people out who are West Indian, Caribbean. I can pick people out from all different types. And when I'm even in Africa itself, Nigeria, I can tell, Igbos apart from Yoruba. I can tell Ghanaians apart from. So Africans have, or melanated people have, all of this kind of like nuance. And I'm not saying that all people from kind of one tribe or ethnicity look the same, but I'm saying you can start to kind of pick out the differences between them. I can tell Ethiopians apart from Eritreans, and someone's told me that's impossible. It's like, well, I've done it many times. And, obviously I can easily tell Somalians apart from Ethiopians, and things like that, where people, if you don't want to see the nuance, you won't see it, and you'll just see, black. But if you want to see the nuance is there. So I think it's quite important to kind of appreciate the differences, that we have. And this goes back, I know I'm rambling a lot, but this goes back to this kind of comment here with all these different terms they used. These terms meant something back then because people understood the complexions that were linked to these terms. So when someone said someone was tawny or swarthy or sanguine or, dusky or, they understood that these things meant slightly different things. And they appreciated it because it wasn't race. It was complexion. So yeah, massive rant there. Sorry about that. You are on the King's monologue, by the way, and I do monologue sometimes. All right, let me go back to the comments. Sorry. Oh my God, I'm way behind now. All right. Yes, Moors looks like my cousin Mantan. Blah blah blah. Hello, pull up Cleopatra. Haven't got any Cleopatra, I'm afraid. When I went to the British Museum, Frederick the Third looks like Barry White. I agree. A kind of classic whitewashing. I agree. Sons of Isaac. That week. Thank you, Dorval. Thank you. I'm not sure if it was you that actually said it originally. There you go. Saxons, sons of Isaac, which makes sense. Sax, sons of Isaac. I'm not gonna forget that now. Wicked. You smashed it. Thank you. Was King James of Scotland of African descent? I think all the Scots were, but I'm not going to go into that now because I haven't got enough evidence or I haven't got enough data. So it's just words at this point until I can kind of provide you with stuff. Olive, brownish red. Yeah, kind of like, yeah, brownish. a deep brownish with a hint of red. I say, yeah, I agree. It's very difficult to find any real images unless you travel and see for yourself. If you saw a painting of Erling Haaland, would you think he was black, the footballer? I don't know what Haaland looks like. Let's have a look. Haaland. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. By the way, he looks like he's Scandinavian, and there's a lot of, surprising to a lot of people, there's a lot of African ancestry in Scandinavians, more so than a lot of people. People are very surprised at that, actually. Scandinavians carry very high African ancestry and very recent high African ancestry. So yeah, there you go. But that's a nice kind of like a nice kind of comparison there, because he is quite full lips. It looks a little bit like the George III that pulled up, apart from the fact that he doesn't have the big grey afro. So that's a bit different. Swarthy is literally Germanic root word for black. Agree. Yep. In German and modern Dutch, it's still literally Schwarz. Agree. And I think even in Dutch, they have this character called Zwart Piet, who is Santa Claus' little black helper. So yeah, Ethiopian, Egyptian in old texts includes the Bible, always means black. Well, it definitely means people from the African continent. And I know that Ethiops literally translates to burnt-footed people, I think it was, people who have burnt feet or something like that. So there's definitely a synonymous with dark skin and Ethiopian. I definitely agree. People can lie about their ethnicity or move in recent history. Not sure what you meant there, Dragon of the West. I'm going to go back now. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, that's the comments here. I'll come back to the comments, so just bear with me. I'll get there. So this is Frederick III of Saxony again. I think we've exhausted this one now. Obviously, that requires kind of like extra research. This one over here wasn't one that kind of like made me go ooh, but I still was like, yeah, there's definitely some kind of like mixed stuff going on here. This is definitely not your straightforward kind of, but I got a more North African feel from this kind of character set here. So this is Philip II of Spain. So I went and I did a bit of a search on some of his images as well after I saw this coin, and I found a really nice bust. Now, once again, this isn't something that I thought was, super overtly African, but I found this very detailed marble bust, and I was like, I got kind of not Hannibal. Who's the one that, who's that North African who settled in the UK that they use for examples? I can't remember his name. If you remember, put him in the text, in the chat. But yeah, that's the kind of like vibe I got off when I saw that image there anyway. But let me continue. Where were we? Here we go. Yes. Thank you, Septimus Severus. Thank you very much, Quilida. So that's the kind of vibe that I got there. I got kind of Septimus vibes when I saw that kind of, yeah. So anyway, let's move on. So Gothic peoples, this is just, I thought I'd grab this actually because I did speak about Vandals and Goths earlier. So modern European people seem to all descend from the Gothic people, and this is a part of their history which they know is there, but it's also very often overlooked. But this is where a lot of the ancestry comes from, majority of the ancestry. So anything pre-Goth, pre-Vandal hasn't really got anything to do with what we classify as the modern European, and yet history lays claim to that. One of the big pushes of Western civilization, and this is spoken about quite extensively in the book Black Athena. I don't know if anyone's read that, by Martin Bernal. He speaks about the creation of Western civilization. Western civilization is an idea that didn't exist prior to a couple hundred years ago, when following the Napoleon Mandate, they decided they were going to reshape history. And the ancient model or our ancient understanding of history was lost at that point, and it was replaced by the Western model, which is what we see at the moment. So the Western model was essentially people of Vandal, Gothic, or Visigoth descent decided that they were going to extend their history back beyond its genesis, which was, AD 400, really, when they kind of like entered into the, the known civilization world, so to speak. And they were going to extend it back, and they were going to create this thing called Western civilization, where the Greeks would become a part of their civilization, the Romans would become a part of their civilization, and actually, were it not for, the pushback from our community, I'm sure they would make Egypt a part of that civilization as well. So essentially extend it as far back as possible. Now this goes hand in hand with the behavior of Vandals. This isn't kind of like strange behavior. This is essentially what the Vandals did. It's a case of defacing history, changing the face of history to make it match their own. And those things that they can't claim, they destroy. So just reading this, says Gothic peoples migrated from the east and settled many parts of Europe between and around AD 340 to AD 540. Initially, groups settled around the Black Sea and Crimea, and later many migrated further west. So migrated from the east. So what's interesting is they migrated from the east into the west. So this is what I said earlier. I did say Germanic, and the reason I wasn't sure is because Germany's not in the east. So this is kind of maybe suggesting the Caucasus Mountains, especially since they started in the Black Sea and Crimea. So it sounds like they migrated from the Caucasus Mountains, according to this. I'm not sure the role that Germany played, but this is, the Gothic people definitely sound like they're coming from the Caucasus region. The Ostrogoths took power in Italy and adopted Roman traditions, which strongly, so this is what I was talking about earlier, adopting traditions of the civilizations that they overtake, which strongly influenced their impressive art and architecture. In Spain, the Visigoths developed their own style inspired by the arts of the Byzantine Empire and Christianity. So that's basically putting into words what I mentioned before. The Lombards of Italy, I wasn't really that aware of the Lombards, but Lombards were Germanic people. So this is maybe the Germanic people who met with them. Maybe, I wonder if the Lombards have got anything to do with the Vandals. I wonder if they changed their name or something like that. We'll look into that. Who invaded Italy from Western Hungary in AD 568. Although the Byzantine Empire held onto the key cities of Rome and Ravenna, the Lombards succeeded in establishing a kingdom in Italy. During the 2 centuries of Lombardic rule, Italy experienced a cultural revival in which urban life flourished. Lombardic art shifted away from traditional Germanic styles and adopted local Byzantine and Christian fashions. So I just thought I'd capture that, and that would be quite interesting to share. Now, this image, I'm sure many people are familiar with, is the image of Mansa Musa, king of Mali, holding a large nugget of gold as depicted. Now, I actually have a bit of an issue with the depiction of Mansa Musa. I know a lot of people are like, the richest king in history. And I think they do a lot of disservice to the Malian Empire by just depicting, Mansa Musa as this kind of rich despot, which is the way I feel they try to kind of portray him. The Malian Empire at the time of the rule of Mansa Musa wasn't this case of, this dude's really rich. This empire essentially was the world's, was the global superpower of the time. They were incredibly rich, but it's not only just the wealth that they had. We know that they had incredible influence. It was said that Mansa Musa, went to Egypt, for instance, Kemet, and or Egypt, I should say, it wasn't Kemet then, and went to Egypt and completely transformed the Egyptian economy. I can't remember exactly what the details were, but they talk about the fact that gold became common because of his visit to Egypt. So when they kind of picture him as this kind of despotic ruler, it doesn't do him justice, because the Malian Empire at the time also housed the largest library in the world, and the library in Timbuktu remained the largest library in the world right up until I think the University of Cambridge was built in I can't remember which century it was, but it was the largest library for a very, very long time. We're talking about, for several hundreds of years. And it was a center for education, center for global education. And a lot of this is overlooked. We're talking about an impressive empire. We're talking about an impressive civilization. Bye. I'm busy. Bye. Close the door.
Where is she?
Close the door.
Why was she just
Shani, you're being really rude. Oh my God. Sorry. Oh my God. The child has just zero regard for what I do. Please forgive me. Yes. So where was I? So they kind of, picture him and they sell him as this kind of despotic ruler and, who was just individually rich. No, talk about the wealth of the Malian Empire. Talk about the richest empire in global history. Don't talk about the richest individual. So it sounds small, but I think these are the little things they do to kind of undermine achievement. Yeah, kids being kids indeed. That one don't have no respect. Oh dear. Anyway, I'm gonna go through some comments and then I'll carry on. Geez, wow. There's been a lot coming through, so let's just have a look. We definitely learn more about our people from European artwork here in the United States. We never see. Okay, yeah, I saw that one. Get more history about European and Americans and South Americans by studying all the wars. Lots of biracials, Moorish, multi-ethnics, blacks, Asians, blackamoors, leaders. Most people have never heard of, for real. As stated in 9 minutes, I'm 9 minutes behind, but didn't want you to go off before mentioning Frederick III. Did you notice they changed his nose too? Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I probably glossed over that. They tend to change their features. Actually, on that note, I'm going to share something a little bit left field because I've got a short on this. So since I've got you live, we might as well kind of like discuss this as well. This is so I'm trying to get my mouse in the right place. Here we go. Bear with me. So I have a short about Queen Elizabeth I. Now this one was obviously incredibly controversial for myself as well, because it was news I wasn't expecting. And it kind of like, this is one of the things that catalyzed, because I did look into this and then I abandoned the whole kind of like British royalties being swarthy kind of thing. I just abandoned it. And then I first got into it like 15 years ago and there wasn't really much data out there. So I kind of left it being very lazy, and I've only just recently re-entered it and I've just been inundated with too much good information. And Queen Elizabeth I and the National Portrait Gallery in the UK actually do work with a lot of these unseen paintings. So I'm just going to click it out. So unseen paintings hidden beneath portraits. Okay, this is the work done by the National Portrait Gallery. So this, for instance, is Sir Francis William, and this will show you the kind of extent of the whitewashing that takes place. Okay, now the National Portrait Gallery, when they're showing us these things, they're not exposing the whitewashing. They're just saying, oh, it's really interesting to see what lies beneath. But this is Sir Francis Walsingham, for instance. Yeah, this is the infrared. This is the X-ray. Once again, if we zoom in, the first kind of, I'm gonna zoom in. There we go. The first instinct is to say, oh, well, it's an X-ray, so it's reversed. But it's not reversed because the whites are preserved, the light areas and the dark areas of the eyes, but something's happened to the skin. And just looking at this image in isolation, without seeing these two images, what would you say you've seen? You can see there's a slightly broader nose that's being hidden here. Okay, you have to look really carefully, but the clues are definitely all there. So you end up with these very pale whitewashed images that have often been touched up. Now, I'm not saying this is always the case, but I'm saying it's often the case. So it's not always, but often. Now, one of the key ones is Queen Elizabeth. Okay. I haven't got much to say about this one because it's very low detail, but once again, you can kind of see a little something going on there with this Thomas Sackeville. But I'm going to, oh, sorry. This one was quite interesting because this little detail over here, which I think was shown, I can't remember what part of the image that was shown in, but you can kind of see that's, anyway, I'm going to skip over that one because I want to get to Queen Elizabeth because this is really interesting. So if I scroll down, I think it's on this page. Here we go. So the 3 images of Queen Elizabeth. Now this is the one that is really quite mind-blowing. Oh dear, sorry, I've lost it. What's going on? Come back. And here we go. Okay, so the 3 images of Queen Elizabeth. So this is the one that we're all given. Okay, the one that looks bizarre because essentially it's just been overpainted and whitewashed. Look at the hair, for instance, of Queen Elizabeth. It's just not, it doesn't look right, does it? Okay, let me click in. There we go. So if you look at the hair of Queen Elizabeth, it just doesn't look right, does it? Okay, it looks bizarre. But the one thing that we're sure of is that it has this very kind of like afro texture, which they haven't been able to hide. Okay, the skin is just literally pink. It's just got so many things that are kind of wrong with it. Now, if we look at the scanned version, there's a few things about it. So here it is. Did I let you zoom in on this one? Oh, they're not. I thought they did. Why only that one? Okay, so I'm going to zoom in as much as I can. There's actually 2 images on the scanned version of Queen Elizabeth. So you can barely see it, but I'm not sure if you can see it. But there's an eye here. Let me pull up my chat so I can see what people are saying, actually. Because it's quite important. There we go. Yeah, so you can barely see it, but there's the first of all, the image that they've kind of painted over, this one, the main image. You can see that this face has just got slightly different features to the face that they're showing you here. Okay, it's got broader lips, it's got a slightly broader nose, and the skin is darker, as you can see here. If the skin was to be lighter, it could be lighter. There's plenty of light features on here. And the hair, just everything looks a bit more natural. Everything looks like it should do for someone who's of maybe like mixed ancestry. Now there's a second image here. You kind of see the 2 eyes and the nose. And to me, that's definitely the same person. The one thing that you might not spot because of the image is not very high resolution is there's kind of an afro here. Okay, that's an afro. It's not a coincidence the way that's shaped. So you can see the face of this person here, and you can see their hair around here. This person, this kind of portrait that's been painted over and painted over again, both of these people are the same person, and they're both either swarthy or at very least of mixed ancestry. They are not this person that we're being given. Now, I know this is really left field, but I actually frankly don't care. This is personally what I believe. And yeah, I just thought I'd kind of share that with you. I wish I had a higher resolution image to show you, but you could kind of look up those on the National Portrait Gallery. Hopefully you get a high resolution image that you can see for yourself. Yeah, let me close that. Let me see how far behind I am with the comments now. Name of paper you can download for free: HLA, Genes in Macedonians and the Sub-Saharan Origins of the Greeks. I will download that. Thank you, Doravel. Hope these chat. I think these chat does preserve afterwards. I'll try and keep it in Greek. Ethiopian means people with burnt face. Oh yeah, burnt face. There you go. And that term was used to describe all African people. Yes, it was indeed. Spoke about that in the maps one that we looked at. Let's scroll down. True, they would say Egypt, Mesopotamia was theirs and connected to Western Europe. That is true. They would take credit. Yeah, absolutely. They kind of try to black apply themselves into history. Dragon of the West says they even tried to get India too. They kind of did with the Aryan influence in the north of India, which ended up in there being the caste system. It's really, the Indian story is quite an interesting one, actually. It's quite an interesting one. So I'm trying to see what I've missed here. Gosh, there's a lot of comments. You might have to forgive me. I might have to skip a few. Thank you, Munira, for the money. 99. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you very much. I can't express how thankful I am for that. It really does make a big difference. Benjamin Franklin's observations state that Europe was wholly black and tawny except for England. I've seen those. He said that Russia was wholly black, Germany was wholly black, the Americas black and tawny. And this is not going back that far. So it kind of makes you wonder what happened, you know, what vehicle was used to completely change the demographic of Europe in such a short space of time. You know, it gets me thinking about things like the world wars and stuff like that. How much they played a role, it's just very interesting. I'm going to try and get through some of these comments because I feel bad if I'm going to skip over all of them. Mansa Musa would have known the original Egyptians were black and would have researched when was there, I think. Yeah, I mean that wasn't the point. Although I agree with what you're saying. Remember, Africans have not been, you know, it's weird because look, one of my favorite rulers, one of my favorite leaders, I should say, Kwame Nkrumah, he married an Egyptian woman, okay, and that kind of speaks to the level of unity Africa had as a continent just post independence, but since then there's been a mighty shift, obviously, to separate, with obviously the kind of the queening of the Middle East and the claiming of Arabia and the attempt to kind of use terms like kind of Caucasoid to drive people apart. Now, I'm not saying that part of that region of the world has been blameless, but the point I'm making is that civilizations always rise up and mistreat neighboring civilizations. That's kind of as old as time, okay? But the cause normally isn't racism. Racism, to me, from my understanding, is a new thing. So there was the potential post-independence for Africa to have a united continent, and I think there's been a very deliberate shift to stop that from happening. Do the Egyptians now look like they used to look? Obviously not. We're aware of the various invasions that took place. But does that forever exclude them for being classified as Africans? I disagree with that. I do. I really strongly disagree with that. I think that, like I said, the separation right now is a political separation. We can agree that the ancient Egyptians were black and all of Africa could still be very unified and we could still be very much, you know, distant cousins on the continent, so to speak. I firmly believe that. And I think it upsets people when I speak like this because they kind of want me to say, no, you have to condemn Egyptians, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because it's not the way I think. I think that, you know, race has been used as a political tool for long enough, and, you know, like I said, leaders like Gaddafi, who I, you know, very much admired, led the way in showing the potential for Africans to unite on the fact that we're African, and for, you know, North Africans to tap into their kind of ancestry, and all of that potential is there. And I think it's there. I think all that potential is there. And I think all of this kind of like division between Africans only plays into the hands of people who want to exploit Africa as a continent. And I know it's getting really political actually now, so I don't want to move on. But I don't know. I don't even know why I went on that rant. I just literally started talking. But anyway, the name Mansa Musa comes from the Arabic name for Moses, which comes from Egypt. Moshe mean son or born of. So Mansa Musa's name is really Kemetic. Yeah, sounds about right. I haven't. Yeah, so I'm guessing that is the Islamic pronunciation, Musa. Yes, Musa is the Islamic pronunciation of Moses. I had a friend called Musa, way back in the day. So yeah, ME inhabited by mostly black African people close to what is now the Nuba people of Kordofan, Central Sudan, whose Y DNA goes back to the region over 100,000 years ago. Their ancestors were pygmy type. Very interesting information there. Thank you for sharing, Afro Mandinga. Brother, do you believe that Southern Italians have black blood in them? Of course they do. Compared to the Northern and Central Italians. I think all Italians have black blood in them. I think Europeans are incredibly black. How about that? This whole idea of kind of like everyone's got black blood in them. Obviously, heavily melanated people have the most of it, but Europeans are the most mixed people on the planet. You can't find a European that doesn't have. So, and this is the thing. This is one of the reasons why these DNA tests are a joke. They're turning around there, telling people you're 100% European or 100% Scandinavian or 100% bollocks. Absolute bollocks. I can tell you, there's not a pale skinned person on the planet who doesn't carry at least 20% recent African ancestry. Recent. I'm not talking about going back 100,000 years. I'm talking about recent African ancestry. They all carry it. And, one of the really, it's one of the deceptions that they've got is making, these DNA tests making people believe that, it's complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. Historians said that Timbuktu books were at a level of 200 LV university standard in Cambridge, according to a French analysis of some translated books. I don't know what 200 LV means, but it sounds interesting. Sounds really interesting. We've talked about Benjamin Franklin, the oldest bones in Britain, Cheddar Man. Yep, thank you for bringing up Cheddar Man. If you haven't seen Cheddar Man before, he is very African, and the don't ignore the straight hair they put on him. I'd imagine that was Afro, even though there were a lot of straight haired melanated people back then as well. Some of the lost phenotypes of Europe. The spooky info I saw about King Charles is apparently he is a descendant of Dracula, allegedly. I don't know about that, but hey, I've heard strange things. There were numerous tribes of barbarians. Some ultimately became the Germans proper, some of the French, the Franks, etc. It appears the most were of Germanic stock. Cool, very interesting. Thank you, Freedom Rings. If America did not look like America now, the same applies to Egypt. Yeah, of course. It was a lie by Max Muller, blah, 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 blah. Tons of Egyptian friends, and I acknowledge their heritage. Thank you. I do the same. And I have Egyptian friends as well. If you go back to the portrait gallery X-ray you are talking about, you have to scroll down a little more to see them. Okay, thank you. I might do that. When do you think England had a black majority? I don't know. I think it was a while ago. As in a black majority. I don't know how far back you have to go there. I could tell you when they had a black aristocracy, and that was right up until the 18th century. Definitely right up to the 18th century. And that's everyone. If you look at the judges, and when I say aristocracy, I would say the judges, the barristers, the kings, the rulers. There was definitely a thing where you had to carry a degree of African ancestry or black blood, which is blue blood, to be able to, rule or to have kind of like senior positions, which sounds very strange today. But yeah, like I said, I've seen stranger things. Starting to make sense now. Musa did leave with ships of his people. Moses translated to Kiswahili is Musa. Excellent. Have you seen Mr. Imhotep's videos? They're awesome. Yes, I have. I love them. Australian Australoids are our cousins. Prehistoric Aboriginal people travel the entire world. Okay, I'm caught up now. I'm going to move on. Thank you for staying with me there. I had to get through all those comments. I'm just going to quickly have a look, see how many. Okay, we've got quite a few people on, 158 people on. Only 121 likes. So come on, that's like 30, 40 people on here who are listening and haven't hit the like button. Please hit the like button. The more likes we get, the more likely we're going to fill up this room. I'm going to move on. So this is another scan of that map of Mansa Musa. Now, these images, I think, were just terracottas. And I just took these images because, once again, I liked some of the kind of like, I was just looking at the hairstyles that were present in Europe around this time. So dreadlocks and plaits seem to be very common. Once again, the hair seemed to always be in locks or plaits. It's very rare that you'll see the hair just kind of out. So if this was it makes it obviously very difficult to determine the ethnicity, because you don't see. It's so hard in the ancient world to see any examples of kind of like flowing straight hair. It's very rare. Anytime you see long hair, it tends to be in locks. So it pulls up question marks about, what people, what the phenotype of people were, basically. This is just a dwarf, a naked dwarf. um, yeah, not much to say about the image other than, once again, you can clearly see there's kind of obviously, this is probably, I don't know if this was someone who's, oh yeah, I did read recently that dwarves were very sacred in ancient Egypt, and they used to kind of like carry them. If they came across dwarfs, they would be captured and essentially revered and worshipped. So that's quite interesting to kind of read about that. Another just head that I found. Not much to say about that one. It was made in Egypt, 3rd century BC, so that would have been Ptolemaic era. From the Fayum. I captured this image. Very kind of like African looking woman. When I say African, kind of like very, yeah, yeah, very African looking woman. I don't really think there's much more to say than that. I'm gonna keep skipping forward. Once again, the hair that I was speaking about earlier. So kind of like these kind of twists or locked hairstyles seem to be very, very common. I haven't got the badge of this one, but this appears to be a terracotta. I think these were all from kind of early kind of like Fayum Egyptian period, if I remember correctly. This is Bes, the one of the famous Egyptian gods, quite a popular Egyptian god. I can't remember what period he was introduced. I think it was Middle Kingdom, if I remember correctly. The Twa from Nubia are venerated small people. There you go. Thank you very much for sharing, Dorvel. Now this is Selenos. Now, the reason I showed this image is because he's always shown, he's kind of like the I'm not gonna say the god of drunkenness, but the god of wine. And he's kind of always depicted as drunk, but he's also always depicted with kind of like very African features, very broad nose, very kind of broad lips, always has thick hair. You'll see lots of different images of Selenos, but they're always depicted in this way. So, it's quite interesting just to see one of these depictions of Selenos. I think they've got a quite a detailed bust of, an image of this god in, I can't remember which museum it is. I can't remember. I was trying to remember which museum, but I can't remember now. Miniature lamp holder with the head of an African resting on a panelled drum. And that's from Egypt, 1st century BC. So that would have, still been Ptolemaic era, just drifting towards the Roman era. And then some kind of early Greek word here. So this is work here. This is a black-figured skyphos drinking cup with the loom of Circe, who is shown with Odysseus and one of his sailors changed into an animal. So I think these are Greek deities. You can see one of them is clearly, obviously, of African descent. This one perhaps not, because they have made an effort to show the beard is very straight. So this is quite interesting to see. What was this? I can't remember what this was an image of. Did I get the? Did I get the tag? No, I didn't get the tag. So this next image is actually an image of kind of like what is described as African boxers, and this is what's quite interesting because they're described as African boxers. It was made in Italy, so Roman, probably found in Rome, and it leads one to ask why they made the decision that these were Africans and not just black Romans, which is what I suspect they were. This is supported also by this kind of vase, which shows the kind of same tradition. So those of you who kind of like are fans of combat sports like I am can see that they're, they go back some time, particularly boxing, so you see certain people dominating boxing. It might be a heritage thing. Black figured amphora showing a boxing contest, Greek, made in Athens about, so this is much older, made a few hundred years before, but they're happy to say that these are Greeks, and they don't say these are Africans, but physically they look quite similar to the two boxes here. Okay, they look quite similar. These are obviously 3D, but if you look at the features here, once again, the hair, the features, skin, these look very similar. So yeah, where's the decision made about whether or not they are African or not? Are they just indigenous, dark-skinned Romans, or African-featured Romans, so to speak? So this is black-figured lekithos oil bottle. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry, I'm looking at this one. So this is bronze finial form of a chariot pole decorated with Triton. So, yeah. I'm going to hit some of the comments really quickly. You guys are really interacting, which is great. It just leaves me with a lot to read. All these Egyptians with their panties in a bunch because of portrayals of Cleopatra is cracking me up. I'm not bothered if she was white or Macedonian, but the outrage of the black. Yeah, absolutely. The blackness. I mean, the semi-blackness, isn't it? She's biracial, so it's kind of like they even offended at that. It's like, yeah, this is just, it's a real stretch, isn't it? Let's carry on. Some say Stuart dynasty of Scotland, Ireland, England had traces of black ancestors. Not traces. Apparently the word Stuart has the same etymology, or at least it's been speculated has the same etymology as swart. So I'm getting the impression that the Stuarts perhaps were a lot darker than what we're being sold. And I've actually seen some descriptions of Stuarts to suggest that they were very swarthy, very of very black ancestry. And once again, when we're talking about Europe, black doesn't mean African. It just means black. They had been there, or their ancestors are likely have been there either as long as Cheddar Man, or as long as the Romans, because both of those groups we know were black in the UK. So which of those lines did they descend from is the question, but either way they'd been there for thousands of years. Just did, and on my side it says 98 likes. Thank you very much. Thank you for popping the likes up to 144 likes, so I appreciate it. To our people from Nubia, yeah, I've read that. Black elves of European lore were pygmy. Yes. So that would have been like things like the leprechauns. So that's actually a really interesting point when we talk about this kind of like small people in these kind of like European folk tales. A lot of them are related to the pygmy. I saw a video where a young woman's DNA revealed she had 16% African markers. She was light-skinned with wavy red hair. This young woman cried like someone had just smacked her in the face. Oh, she deserves it. She deserves more. I wish she was like 40%. Some of these weirdos. Although in saying that, I'm not sure if I went to an ancestry test and they told me I was like 50%. It's Scandinavian or something. I don't know how I'd feel either. I might start crying. So there you go. What's your thoughts on Eurocentrists acting like the Ptolemaics were indigenous to Kemet? Oh, I don't have any thoughts on that. It's just exactly what I think I said about them trying to apply themselves into civilizations they don't belong in. It's funny because I speak quite a lot about the fact that the Ptolemaic era was a period of occupation, and that's another thing. If you want to hear Eurocentrists get their panty in a bunch, tell them that Tell them actually no, the Greeks were invaders and they were colonizers, and actually they made life miserable for the Egyptians. Tell them that, and they get their no. Alexander was a liberator. You know, it's like they watch movies like 300 and they really believe it. You know, that the Greeks were going around. You know, the same Spartans who, in the same movie, they admit drowned their babies, were the ones spreading democracy to the world and freeing the world from the tyranny of the Persian Empire. It was, you know, one ruler, domineering ruler overtaking another. Now, I'm not saying that the Persians were bad. I'm not saying that the Greeks were bad. I think they were just, you know, civilization is not really civilized, but, you know, they were just, you know, groupings of people who were taking their opportunity at, you know, having economic prowess over the world. Essentially, that's what they were. The Egyptians did it in their time. You know, some Egyptian rulers did it. You know, they weren't always peaceful in Kemet. So, you know, it's just a part of history. The problem comes when they try and take these people and try and make them seem like they were, you know, God's gift to every land that they entered. You know, no, they weren't. Let's be honest, you know. I saw lesson and I read that. What's your thoughts on? Okay, we've read that already. Black cats were used to scare off evil spirits in ancient Egypt. Looks like they are not a bad luck at all. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Has that just skipped forward? Yeah, it has. Oh my. Okay, look, we'll get through this as quick as possible. He looks like he's going to box. Yep, they were the ancestors, the Twa. All these Egyptian. Okay, now read that. Okay, read that. Sorry, it jumped. So please excuse me. Black cats were used. Yeah, read that. Actually, the Egyptian god Osiris, Isis, and Horus are also depicted as pygmy. I did not know that. Always or just on occasion? Is that? Yeah, clear that up for me, because I had no idea. Being short in stature makes you closer to the creator. Very interesting. The Egyptian goddess Bast is depicted as a black cat. She is even venerated in both Black Panther. Yeah, I've heard Bast being spoken about in Black Panther. I'm a bit of a Black Panther fan. Number one, I didn't like so much. Number two, I thought was great. Best Nubian god of fertility and childbirth. Thank you, Wesker, for filling us in with that info. The Ethiopian eunuch mentioned in Acts 8 came to Judea to worship at the temple and was baptized by Philip the evangelist 2,000 years ago. Judea during that time was controlled by Pontius Pilate. Okay. Yes, the Ethiopian eunuch, I do remember that. Andaman and Nicobar Islands are home to some of the most ancient African people. Yeah, Andaman Islands just below India, aren't they? And they're people who've retained their kind of, you know, they're the most, very old kind of black people. It's kind of weird because you can't really call them African if they've been, you know, in that place for like 20,000 years or however long it's been they've been there. They're the most Asian people on the planet. They are like super Asian, but they also happen to be incredibly black, with, you know, incredibly African features. So it's really weird. So this is the thing about the term African. It's kind of like we use it because we don't want to use the term black. It kind of gets a bit weird saying melanated all the time, but we want to be clear what kind of black we're talking about. But then, you know, when you've been out off the African continent for thousands of years, at which point do you stop calling people Africans? Because if you're going to call them Africans, then you may as well call Europeans Africans, who essentially descend from Africans and probably haven't been in Europe or Asia as long as many of these black people who we're calling Africans. So it's kind of, it's the same discussion we had, I think, a couple of days ago about African Americans. Kind of like, what do we call them? It's confusing. Could you recommend a book that gives details about how Greek gods were borrowed from Kemetic gods? Stolen Legacy is a good book. And there's also a book by The Afrocentric, what's it called again? The Afrocentric Origin of Greek Civilization, I think it's called. Once again, it's by a Nigerian called Innocent something Oluyemi, I think it is. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it, but it's like a detailed version of Stolen Legacy. I'll try and you know what I'll do? I'll update. I've got the book. It's actually in my corridor, but I don't want to leave the live stream and get the book. What I'll do is I'll update my comments feed, Wesker, and I'll mention that book for you so you can have a look at that. But that's a really good book about kind of Greek gods being borrowed from Kemetic gods. Also, Cleopatra, and I can't remember exactly what it's called, so don't quote me on that. I'll find the book in my corridor and bring it. Cleopatra the Seventh was a Macedonian, literally a colonizer. Yep. We spoke about that. Druze are said to be Twa. Do you consider dark Pakistanis or Turks to be blacks, and do some of them call themselves black? I don't think so. I think you got Sri Lankans, but even Sri Lankans I don't think classify themselves as politically black. So it's kind of like, I definitely don't classify Turks to be black. No, I don't really classify any of those groups. But then kind of like, how important is the term black? That's the big question, isn't it? Which is why we kind of try and find a better term to use that we all understand what we're talking about. But it's kind of weird because when we're talking about black, we're talking about that term that we've all been, what unifies us, what unifies me to an African American, to, a South African person, to all of these different places that we've all been kind of grouped together and called the same thing. But it doesn't necessarily mean we all share identical histories. We've all got quite unique histories. So it's weird. Like I said, race is very political. Do people realize that Nubia, south of Egypt, has more pyramids? Yes, indeed, and was likely the source of civilization as culture and technology spread along the current of the Nile from Nubia to Kemet. Absolutely. And I feel your gosh there as well. I feel your gosh. India has roots to Egypt and Cameroon, even language, Tamil and Cameroon. Yes. I've heard about this, and it was very known that India was a colony of Ethiopia, or colony of the Ethiopians, being the African continent. So that was known back then. I think India had a massive kind of Aryan invasion, from what I know about India's history, and that's what ultimately changed a lot of the demographic of India. So we are very separated from kind of like those Eastern Asians now. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure how how redeemable that separation is between. But yeah, I mean, it's proven if you look at the Andaman Islands, which were mentioned earlier. Okay, the people who remained on the Andaman Islands, have a very distinct, African-looking phenotype. And we know they've been there for, tens of thousands of years now. Alexandria is on ancient record as being the mixed people. Yes, I agree with that. Europeans get pissed when I show them the document and source. The blackfellas said that they and Africans are one in the same. Look it up. Jebel Shaba. They found the morphology of the bodies to be similar to West Africans. Jebel Shaba. Where's that? I must have missed you off a comment, man. Afro Mandinga. All right, so I'm gonna pause there because there's a lot more new comments coming in. I'm gonna skip on because I've got some more artifacts to kind of show everybody, quite interesting ones. So this one is a marble relief showing a man in Corbita. Now this is Roman era, found in Carthage. So showing what I can only describe as seafaring Africans. Obviously, we're very aware of that. But I was just literally listening to a documentary just short, just not very long ago about they came before Columbus, and the fact that, Africans, regularly traverse the seas to the Americas, and the seafaring ability of Africans is something that is very kind of understated and hidden in history, but there's lots of clues. So if you look around, you'll find the clues for these, regular trips. One of the things that was discussed was the fact that Ramesses II was found with coca leaf in his stomach, and the coca leaf is something that grows exclusively, or at least back then grew exclusively in the Americas. So it was kind of like, well, how did it get there? There had to be some kind of contact. And it's one of the many things that one of the things that Eurocentrists do is they just ignore when we provide, really, indisputable proof of something that they is not part of the dialogue or they don't want discussed. They literally would just ignore it. They'll say, well, look, if we don't respond to it, if we don't have any peer-reviewed papers, if we don't write any media about it, it will just go away. And it's important that we, as kind of like modern day researchers, we continually resurface these things and bring them to the forefront so they can't be ignored. This one really interested me. So this is a bronze steelyard weight in the form of an African head. It interested me because it has those twists. I don't know if you've seen my short. I have a short about the Kemetic short twist, or just basically it's an African twist. It's the starting point of kind of like dreadlocks, and it's the most common hairstyle that you'll see in ancient Kemet. It's always there, These images, are these the ones from, okay, so there was a reason I captured this image. Yes, this one's Cypriot. And once again, it was just the hair. So what I spoke about earlier in regards to the hair always being in locks, and locks always being the preferred method to achieve length, which then, begs the question, if they wanted long hair and it was kind of lank hair, then why the locks, essentially? This is quite a nice figure. Cantharos, double-headed red figure, Cantharos. A drinking cup. This is Greek. So, one of the reasons I captured this as well is have a look at this carefully. Look at the color over here, okay? So the main color we're being confronted with is this kind of orangey red. And this is a similar thing that we see happen in Egypt, okay, this orangey red. But the original color you can see is this reddish brown, okay? So just imagine if that reddish brown, which is now completely faded, this kind of dark brown hue, was the color of the face. It kind of changes everything. And this is one of the things we do get hoodwinked a lot in ancient Kemet by that red hue that they kind of sell to us. But no ancient Egyptians were deliberately red. Okay, red is just the undertone that's kind of survived, that's kind of carried, but the color was always brown. And we have to kind of remember that the color was always brown. There were no red-skinned ancient Egyptians. I just captured these because I just once again like the pillars that they stand upon. This is, those of you familiar, a Phaeum portrait. So this is what I believe the ancient Greeks would have looked like. This is, I think, a very common ancient Greek phenotype. So this is for the people who have a problem with the portrayal of Cleopatra. This is the ancient Greeks. Look at this brother. Yeah, I think that this image kind of speaks for itself. Now, I actually captured this image to show some examples of a non-prognathic face. So I was speaking earlier about the fact that if you look at the side view of this image, okay, the back of the eye, the back of the mouth, not quite in line, but they're almost in line. This is kind of like a standard European profile, okay? You could see this one here as well, almost directly in line. So this is a very standard European profile, okay? Back of the eye, back of the mouth, almost in line with each other. Now, when the back of the mouth is, at 45 degrees, 40 degrees, those kind of angles, that's the point at which it's well outside of the norm for Europeans, and what very much within the norm for Africans. So it's one of those things you can't just kind of ignore. Okay, it's something that's very common. Now Africans can have zero prognathism, like this head over here. That's very common. Okay, very common for Africans to not have prognathism, but we're the only ones who have the range to have both zero and lots of prognathism, and you could have that literally within the same family because of the phenotypic diversity within Africans. So, but Europeans don't have that. If they have that, like you've seen, they'll call it Habsburg's jaw, and they'll say this is some kind of a disability or something. So when you see lots of prognathism, particularly you see it in the Egyptian art, the Kemetic artwork, it's in all of them. So if you look at pretty much all of the statues of Kemetic rulers, even the ones that they try and lay claim of, just take a side view of them and you'll note they are incredibly prognathous. They are definitely African. But yeah. So this is a crouching African Roman, probably made in Campania in the 1st century BC. Once again, I'd just be interested to know what the classification of it being African was. Was it just that they have African features? Perhaps this is a Roman, you know. Once again, this one over here has those twists, that common Egyptian or Kemetic hairstyle, which makes me think that this would have been made. This one probably is an Ethiopian or an Egyptian, because that hairstyle seems to be one that's kind of very common in Egypt. And then this one's really interesting. Okay, this is an acrobat, and what's really interesting about this is it's actually being classified as an Egyptian. Okay, so it actually says here, this statue may show a member of the Tentrite tribe of Egypt, famous for diving on the backs of crocodiles in the Nile. Now, what's really interesting about this, I did research the Tentrite tribe, and I couldn't find really anything on them. I'm going to keep looking and seeing what I can kind of like dig out and discover, but I couldn't find anything of them. But there's a clear acknowledgement that this is an Egyptian, okay? And we can see that, I mean, this is probably the most African face and body you're ever going to come across. I mean, that, you know, that's an African booty. Let's be real. That's like the most African booty that I've probably ever seen. All right. This is kind of like steatophagia to the fullest. Okay. And the hair, once again, those Kemetic twists. Okay. Those Kemetic twists are there. This is an Egyptian by definition of the. So it's really interesting when I kind of see things like this. I'm like, well, look, the British Museum's telling you what an Egyptian looked like. And Romans have got so many busts of ancient Egyptians, and they all have this kind of face. So it's kind of like, what kind of level of denial do you need to be in? Not denial, babunch. What level of denial do you have to be in to be able to kind of be confronted by these kind of images and not, you know, accept that the, you know, Egyptians were, you know, the same as other Africans? I don't know what kind of denial you need to be in, you know, as a, you know, if you're watching this as, you know, one of those modern Egyptians who kind of like is get offended by Cleopatra and, you know, Egypt is for Egyptians. Okay, well, cool. This is an Egyptian, according to the British Museum and according to the Romans who made this piece of artwork. This is an Egyptian. What now? You know, show me an Egyptian that's not in Aswan who looks like this. Anyway, let me hit up some of these comments. Oh man, there's a lot. Oh man. Oh my gosh, there's so many comments. I'm gonna feel really bad. Gonna have to skip a few. Maya and Inca have serpents on the headdress. Oh yeah, I've heard about that. And I've seen it, when I say heard about it. I've actually got a whole folder of the Egyptian culture carrying into the ancient Americas. That's really interesting. That we could look at that another day, actually. I found a lot of old stuff recently. Locks look like tree roots. Afro looks like bushes, which is nature. Yeah, I actually used to say it to my daughters. I used to say, look, your hair grows up like the trees and the bushes. It doesn't fall down, so it shows that your hair carries life. And so yeah, my daughters love wearing their hair natural. American, all mentioned to have copper-colored people. Aztecs, yep, same as ancient Egypt, I guess. During my research on the cocoa leaves, there's a study that ended with Egypt had so many plants that no longer exist, so they suggested one of those plants tested like cocoa leaf. Interesting. I think the cocoa leaf here, we're talking about cocaine, the coca leaf, not cocoa. If that's different, I think it is different. So I think it was the coca leaf where we get cocaine from. This is gonna sound, he looks like Obama. That's probably one that I've gone past already. This is gonna sound pseudo, but sometimes I believe people who say white people would you have to, okay, I'm not, listen, you're gonna get my live cancelled, Whisker. I'm not going there. That portrait, he is even more darker than Obama. I'm trying to think, which one was that referring to? Okay, I can't remember what that one's referring to. Someone posted a video of a giant statue of a black man carved from the mountain of the coast of Peru. Oh yeah, I wish I'd saved the video, but made me realize before the flood there wasn't a Pacific Ocean. Interesting. That's worth looking into. The previous portrait you've shown looks like the singer Chris Brown. Yeah, I'm a bit lost because we've been time skipping around. Mediterranean people, especially the ancient Greeks, who are much more multi-ethnic than Romans, they look Brazilian. I actually don't agree that the ancient Greeks are more multi-ethnic than the Romans. I think the Romans were the most multi-ethnic. I think actually Rome brought back had a lot of dark-skinned, very, very kind of, yeah, very, I think they brought a lot of very black presence back. But it's obviously hidden from us. People think that the Romans are lily white, and it's just like, it's not true. There's like everywhere the Romans are. Here's the trick, and obviously you guys will know this. So I'm not going to teach anyone to suck eggs. When you see the term slave attached to something randomly, just ignore it. That's just Western historians being racist. So you'll see often, you'll see the picture of a black noble in ancient Rome, and I'll say, a dressed up slave or something stupid like that, or a slave that rose to nobility. Every single Roman emperor, that was black, they'll say, Septimus Severus was a slave who rose to nobility. Like, guys, come on, let's screw on our common sense heads there. In what country ever in history has a slave risen to become king? There's only one way you become king. Yeah, the only way you become king is that you inherit it. Yeah, it's literally the most, it's nepotism at its finest. Becoming the king of a nation, you have to inherit that. So either you inherit it, or either your family's noble and you're the next best claim, or you team up with someone and you knock off the previous king. That's how you become king. You don't prove yourself as a worthy slave and then prove yourself in battle, and then they go, actually, hey, you slave, we're going to make you our king. But this seems to happen every single time you have a black monarch or a black aristocrat being depicted in ancient Rome, and it's ridiculous. They are just Romans, okay? They are Romans, and they are, the racist Western historians are just back applying their racist logic to give us this idea that all dark-skinned people depicted in history ever were slaves. And actually, I think even African historians do themselves to this disjustice when they sometimes explore African history, and they take that, the moment I start seeing the word slavery and we've gone beyond the 17th, 16th century, once we're back beyond that, and I still see people talking about 12th century, blah blah blah, and then the slaves were taken for, I'm like, I'm switching off from you. I'm switching off. I'm looking at you, I'm thinking, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, this is not a slavery issue. Just because they're black, they weren't slaves. You need to get out of that mindset. That's them hoodwinking you. The locality of Caucasian spread can almost be imagined as a white drop of ink that just dropped on Eurasia, and you can see the edge of the continent has a gradient that goes black the more south. Yep. It keeps jumping every time I scroll. Sorry, lost. Oh my goodness. Okay. We are here. That's an African bum right there. Yeah, straight up. Pause. You have to pause it, man. It's an African bum, straight up. Funny you mention that, as I've seen two women saying they were not from here. Never heard them talk about. Oh, okay, no. We're talking about that stuff that's gonna get cancelled again. Wow, that artwork is definitely interesting. Obviously, Black Egyptian. I want to visit the British Museum one day. I'm guessing if it's worthwhile the one time at least. Yet they're having their fit saying Cleopatra wasn't black, even though there are articles going back years that states she is. And if you look at the Vatican Library of Congress, it will say the same. The British Museum is full of stolen artifacts. Yep, it's nothing lol about it. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The tongue of Egypt tells us that Africa is the inner land born of literally the birthplace. They knew no other. Crocodiles in the house of present-day Nubians. Yes, and also I've heard something about the fact that someone could correct me here, but I've heard that the West African crocodile in particular was the one that was venerated in ancient Egypt. Yeah, I don't know how true that is, but I definitely heard that quite recently. Wasn't Joseph a slave in Kemet who became governor of all of Kemet in the Bible? Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, it's the Bible, and I don't mean any disrespectful way, but there's a lot of things said in the Bible that I don't believe. You essentially claims Egyptians portrayed Nubians different from them, and that is why Sarenput, governor of Tar-City, is portrayed as an Egyptian who were African. Well, they don't. You essentially claims that Egyptians portrayed Nubians is false. Different is false. They just portrayed a phenotype different, so different groups or ethnicities that existed in Egypt, and so in Kush and Kemet were always portrayed very specifically. Okay, the Kushites were never portrayed or displayed with a single phenotype, and the Kemetics were never portrayed or displayed with a single phenotype. Depending on where you were, which nome you were in, from the north to the south, there was a range of phenotypes, and they were very accurate at displaying those phenotypes. And yeah, so even when they were displaying just the Kemites, sometimes they would display different phenotypes, different kind of types of people who were ancient Egyptians, and they used to do the same with Kush. It's just kind of accuracy more than anything. Our story is not us being slaves. We were kings and priests. Absolutely. Septimus Severus' mother was Roman. His father was Punic from North Africa. Whoa, Dorval, that's good info. They called Spartacus king of the slaves, but Spartacus was a tribal prince before he was sent to the games. They called Jesus king of the Jews. Remember how he was treated, both crucified and lynched. Interesting. Great scholars, inventors. I'm gonna get back now. Let's move on. I've caught up enough. So there you go. That's the Tentrate tribe, African, Egyptian. This is the bronze head of Augustus. The reason this is interesting is because this was found in Meroe. Okay, this is the Meroe head. So this is it says made in Egypt, but it was actually found in Meroe, which is obviously in Sudan, ancient Kush, where this was found. So this is the head of Augustus, the Roman emperor. It's interesting. Is this a bit of African artwork? Why is there a head of, it's I just find it quite interesting. This was found in Meroe. Now, from my understanding, what's interesting about this, now someone might be correct because I'm going off head here, but I don't think the Romans had any success conquering Kush. I don't think Kush was conquered until the Islamic expansion. So I think that's when Kush first fell. So if that be the case, I was just kind of wondering about the origin of this head of Augustus and why it would have been in Meroe. Would that would that have signified maybe they successfully, invaded Rome and Egypt and took this back as spoils? I'm not sure, but it's just kind of interesting. Oh, there you go. Look, Quali Durat, thank you very much. You've kind of answered. Bronze head of Augustus cut down by one of the soldiers of Amyranus in 25 BC. There you go. So I was right. It was a guess, but it was a good one. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. I'm gonna skip forward a few now. Let's see if we can get some interesting stuff. Cause I'm gonna end this stream in about 10 minutes. By the way, because we've been going in. Let me just quickly have a look at the numbers. See how many people are still tuned in. Oh, still 150 people here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Yeah, we've been going in. Let me skip ahead a bit. Let you see some of these images. I don't want to kind of skip too fast. The floor. Now, where are these from? Etruscan. So yeah, I'm in the Etruscan section now. Now, Etrusca, I find very interesting because it's my belief that the Etruscans were a melanated people. And obviously they're quite selective about the Etruscan artwork that they show, but even the ones that they show to me suggest that these were definitely a melanated people. Etrusca is obviously south of Italy, an Italian civilization along the Mediterranean, and they show, to me personally, I'm definitely of the impression that the Etruscan civilization was a melanated civilization. That was the first one. I think the Etruscans kind of predate the Romans, and hence why one of the reasons why I'm quite open about the fact that I definitely of the impression that the Romans were a much more melanated society even than the Greeks. I believe the Romans in general had a much more kind of quote unquote African presence or appearance than the Greeks did. And actually, if you even look at something as simple as the Roman togas, sometimes you have to kind of look at what you can see and not what they've been feeding us a steady plate of BS. Look at the Roman togas. The only place that you see kind of togas worn in that fashion is like Ghana, where you kind of have it slung over one shoulder. This is an African trend, to take, essentially large bits of material and wrap them around your body in that format. There's nothing European. There's nothing Levantine about the appearance of the Romans. They were, just like the ancient Egyptians, very African in their presentation. And I think they're quite good at twisting the script. Thank you, Kente Cloth, for Ashanti or any Akan people, exactly. And they're all Ghanaian, like I mentioned. Obviously, we have a similar thing in Nigeria, but I think that kind of like single shoulder thing is definitely a Ghanaian thing. That's a toga. That's what the Romans looked like. That's how the Romans dressed. So, where did that culture come from? It's not, certainly wouldn't have been a lily colored people who essentially would be exposing one shoulder to the scorching heat of southern Italy, and wherever the rest of the world where the Romans settled, be it Egypt, etc. For them to have the confidence in that kind of dress, I'm just seeing a lot more melanation than what we're sold. This is an Etruscan vase. Keep going. And this one is another Etruscan work, and I captured this once again because this one dates back to 540 BC. So this is very old. But I captured this because the nose has been tampered, and actually this is not the only time that you'll see this in the British Museum where there's clear tampering and they won't mention it. That clearly doesn't match and that's something that's been thinking, and that actually, really generally affects the face and the actual final phenotype of this sculpture. The fact that this nose has been tampered and they've tried to kind of give it this kind of pointy length, but it's clearly been tampered and glued on, So it's kind of like, this is, I don't know, this is partly where a lot of the deception lies, when they would tamper with artworks. This is Etruscan as well. The hair in locks again, which I always find quite interesting. This is Etruscan also. You can see here the hair showing clearly kind of that coily African appearance, nose cut off. This one, even with the nose cut off, still has a very African appearance. Head covering, so that's not obviously the hair, that is a head covering similar to what you see in Kemet. So perhaps a covering for locks underneath, or maybe even similar to a do-rag like I'm wearing at the moment. Another Etruscan piece. This is a kind of a typical what you'll get from ancient Kemet. Nose completely chiseled off, so you can't see that. I can't remember the name. I don't think they even had a name for whoever this pharaoh was, but it's a red granite. Oh no, here we go. So this is, head of a 19th dynasty pharaoh. You don't actually give you the name. They said possibly Ramesses II. Yeah, maybe. Doesn't look particularly. Well, yeah, we can't really tell because the nose is in there. I'm just trying to look at the shape of the face to see if it looks similar to Ramesses II. And he can see he has that kind of, the beard thing has been chiseled away as well. So it does make it quite difficult to work out the phenotype of this one. Now, this is, what I'll zoom in here. It says the first library to contain all knowledge. So this is kind of like rescued text. Oh, I thought I got more images than that of this. But you see loads of these stone tablets. Got to move forward. Now these statues are all from, or Ushabtis are all from the 25th dynasty. So this is Taharqa, I believe. Some of you will be familiar with that face there. Was it for Taharqa? It might be. I've got the images, but these are all from the 25th dynasty. All of these ones. I find this quite interesting. So this was Taharqa. This is Taharqa over here. These center two are Taharqa. And then we got some other, Napatan period, so some other 25th dynasty rulers here. And, they don't look any different than the normal rulers of Kemet. That's the thing about the 25th dynasty. So it's quite weird because they acknowledge that, the 25th dynasty is the Black dynasty. But the 25th dynasty don't look any different than the other Egyptian dynasties. So where's the acknowledgement? This is two queens from the 25th dynasty. Once again, not looking any different to any of the other Kemetic dynasties. So these images are, all from that 25th dynasty. So who knows who this is? This is quite a famous one that you've probably seen in lots of books. Someone's asked me to do a reconstruction of this one actually this king many times. I know there's a bit of delay, so I'm probably gonna give you the answer before you give me. I think that's, if I remember correctly. Oh, I thought I got the plaque of that. I have to remember now. So yeah, that's Tahaka. I'm going to, so we got the, these are some different groups who obviously inevitably be classified as Kushites, and they probably are, but they might be different types from different areas. Bring of things, you can see the Kemetic kind of brown used there alongside a darker color here and probably a darker color there. One of the rules actually in Kemetic artwork is if you had varying tones or varying complexions within a society, they will alternate them one after the other. So you won't see two of the same color, then the third one that's darker or something. It'll always be like black, brown, black, brown, black, brown. And they did that for Kemites and they did that for Kushites, but they didn't do it for anybody else. So they were basically just kind of showing the diversity once again of what skin tone, or the ranges I should say, of what skin tones look like for ancient Kemet. Let's have a look at some of these comments. I think we're going to wrap up now as well. It's like, it's been a long stream. It's been a hell of a long stream. I think we're going to wrap up now. We didn't get anywhere near as far as I wanted to. I was probably rambling way too much. I am guilty of that. But if you haven't already, hit up that like button. I think we're going to wrap up this one at that point. I think we can revisit the topic, maybe do a part 2. I've got I had some quite interesting stuff that I did want to get to, but it's quite late over here. It's like midnight and I'm getting tired. I've been talking for a long time. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up at that point. If there's anything you want to pop in the chat, say hello to anyone, please do. I'll leave it open for next few seconds, but then after that, I'm gonna wrap it up. I think there's a little bit of a delay. Thank you, Akinola, for saying that was informative. Appreciate it. Redbone is real. Actually, let me get some comments. Let me read the comments actually before I wrap up, because there are quite a few. So I'm gonna read the comments, then I'm gonna wrap it up. Okay, so okay, I gotta go back before that. Okay, so I think we're around here. Yes, this is where I got to. Okay, so oh god, why is it jumping like that? African kingdoms do have cases of slaves becoming kings, which confuses me why we call African slaves slaves. The upward mobility seems better than modern capitalism. I'll have to see some examples, because I've jumped the gun there. I said that I don't think that's the case. But if you've got some examples that are not biblical, not to be disrespectful, but kind of like, actual like real documented examples, I'm definitely up to hear that. I was just in Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, Washington DC, and the Egyptian display was in the African section, and the people they displayed were mostly dark skinned. Nice. So they ain't fighting too much. That's nice to see. Which is very historically accurate, and no one was complaining back then. Maybe because the toxicity of social media nowadays, people are complaining. I'm guessing that's to do with betrayal of Cleopatra or something. Talia said it's well documented that ancient Roman, there were black soldiers and aristocrats, and they weren't slaves, as some have tried to portray them. Absolutely. There were some who were part of the king's military. Absolutely. Bronze head of Augustus cut down by one of the soldiers. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was the bit of information that I needed. These days, movies that try to be historically accurate are called woke. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. How they turn our words against us, isn't it? Woke used to be such a good word to use. There were tons of Ethiopian, Nubians, Kushites that were in the gladiatorial games. Yeah, that's true. Mississippi Morpheus. I watched him on Rev Shock Matthew every Thursday at 4 p.m. One thing to point out, actually, the master teacher who said Ethiopians, Nubians, and Cushites in the gladiatorial games, were they always Ethiopians, Nubians, and Cushites? Although I think they probably was some. I totally agree with you, but some of them might have just been black Europeans, and that's a whole nother discussion. Whose painting were whitewashed? The hair even looks falsely textured. Yeah, indeed. The story of Queen Amanirenas and what she did is remarkable. Good timing. Hilly weird. Nice. We'll make a film about her as portraying a black woman who conquered Rome is against the narrative. Indeed. And to be honest with you, I need to school myself up on Queen Amanirenas, because I've kind of been taught to have glossed over somewhat the important contribution, that important part of history. And it's really important that I kind of know more. Obviously, you see the image of her, kind of like that powerful image of her kind of like holding up those various nations, all those nations by the hair, at Merowe's height. But it would be good for me to know a bit more about exactly what her conquering, during that time meant. But doesn't brown fade over time to light brown, like caramel, rather than reddish? No, it depends what you mix it with. And this is actually a good point, because it's all about undertones. So, for instance, Osiris was never painted green, and they call Osiris the green god. Why do they call Osiris the green god? Because they used to mix the black pigment with the green to get that very kind of deep black. They also used to mix the black pigment with the blue to get the blue. So those people who dye their hair will know, if you've got dark hair and you want your hair to become truly black, you don't dye it black, you dye it a very dark blue, and that will give you the deepest black that you can get. So when it comes to the skin as well, and the skin of the ancient Egyptians, if you want to get that accurate skin color, you have to look at the undertones of the skin. And often many Africans have a reddish undertone to their skin. So often that red, that brown will have a red base to it. When the color fades, apparently when the Egyptians, the use of their paint fades, all that's happened is there's a residue that's left. And a lot of the time that residue tends to be that reddish color that we're confronted with. It's not a case of it fading uniformly like you've kind of like suggested there. It's just a case of that's the tone, that's the color that just seems to be left behind. Now, I know a lot of people think there were red people. I'm not saying that phenotypes haven't been lost, but I'm saying that go to Nubia today and you will see that reddish brown tone, that exact tone in the people of Nubia today. You will see that exact tone. I don't think it's mysterious. Go all across Africa, in fact, not just to Nubia, go all across Africa and you'll see people with that reddish brown skin. So I don't think we have to look for a lost red-skinned phenotype. Personally, I don't think so. I don't. Sorry, I just don't think so. I think it's a common color, and often, actually, let me give an example. I'm going to give an example really quick because I think it's quite important for people to kind of understand what happens there, because otherwise it just sounds like I'm talking. So actually, I'm going to give an example that's going to help. Bear with me. This won't take a second. No. Bear with me. I won't take long. But this will be worthwhile if anything else. Yay, okay, here we go. So check this out. Okay, so this is just an example. So this is the seated scribe. Okay, seated scribe, one of their favorite kind of, artifacts to suggest that Egyptians definitely weren't black. Now, I'm not gonna go to back and forth about these features. I don't think he looks white. But I want to draw your attention to the color, okay? Because this is what he was like when they found him. Now, I want you to pay attention to the knees. Okay, can you see that brown tone there? Yeah. This is what the skin originally looked like all over this. Okay, you can see it's on the nose, on the chin. It's not dirt. It's not mud. It's brown paint. Now, beneath the brown paint is red, okay, which is what they've been more than happy to preserve and clean this statue. So it's like, no, get rid of that brown dirt and restore it to its original sunburnt self. Okay, this is the original color. Okay, the original color is brown. Okay, the red is just the residue, what's been left over. So I can't honestly state that there's ever been, I can find any deliberate use of red tone, even in the, I just can't see it. I can't see it. All I can see is brown and red often being left over and being exaggerated. So that's kind of my perspective on whether or not there was a red race. Okay, I'm just trying to scoot through the comments. A lot of these sculptures are array. I'm not sure what that means. People of no colour, it's funny to me. The exception about slave and kingship can be made with the blameless Ethiopians who allowed a former slave to become king. I would have to read that story. The second person who said that does, I'm sure it's true. What's your view on Persians being black or melanated people? Well, the Persians depicted themselves, didn't they? And they were clearly melanated. And actually, there's Persians, to answer your question, there's people in Iran now, I believe it's northern Iran now, who classify themselves as Persians, and they are black. They won't call themselves Iranians, they'll call themselves Persians. There's not a lot of them, but they have a very similar phenotype, once again, to kind of like Horn Africans. And they're there. They are there. And they have, their numbers are small, but they are there. And they will tell you straight up to your face that they are the true Persians. So I think a lot of the time these people still have traces of the original people there. Okay, I'm gonna go from the bottom up. Red skin is simply mahogany. Yeah, that's kind of what I think. Sometimes it's brown, like shown in this image here. Sometimes it's deep brown. It's deep brown, and we're just kind of left with the red. What sunscreen lotion Superman uses as he gets his power from the sun? Yeah, melanated people don't need sunscreen. What Superman probably is. Yeah, it does. I love this. Thank you for saying I didn't ramble, LJSC. I can never know. Thank you for calling me Farah. Leo Go Live, I appreciate that. Notice how the modern Egyptians accept Greek and Arab colonizers, but they reject the Nubians. It's really funny. Actually, I love this point. I have to just extend this point and then we'll wrap it up, all right? It's really funny how they're making a big fuss about the fact that this mixed race woman, who is clearly much closer in phenotype than any previous kind of portrayal of Cleopatra has ever been, that they're really, really angry about it. But by the same stretch, if there was any kind of portrayal, there are white people in the cast to portray the Greeks, and they got no problem with that. They got no problem with the Greeks being portrayed lily white, regardless of how accurate or inaccurate that is. They'll have no problems with white people portraying Egyptians, but they'll have a problem with black people portraying Egyptians, even though there's black Egyptians in Egypt to this day. So there's so much double standard. Like I said, I think a lot of these points were argued really well in that what's his name? Piers Morgan did an interview with that kind of that Egyptian lawyer who's kind of suing Netflix over the historical inaccuracies. It's absolutely ridiculous. But there was a guy on there, and he argued the point really well. I can't even, I think he did the subject justice, and I think he kind of, to be honest with you, I think he took that Egyptian guy to school. So that was my personal perception, but I could be biased. I am biased. Who am I kidding? But yeah, that's it. All right, I'm gonna wrap up now. I did say I was gonna wrap up, and it's gone on for nearly. I think we've gone on for nearly 3 hours now. So I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you next time on the King's Monologue. Yeah.